The shuttle's thermal tiles still ticked from re-entry when the docking arms clasped the hull and drew it, crab-like, into the shadowed guts of Zhurun Interstellar Defense Academy. Through the oval viewport, Arya Holt watched a slice of stars vanish behind a curtain of alloy and glass. The cabin lights rose a few notches, harnesses unlatched with synchronized clicks. Somewhere aft, a baby, no, not a baby, a Threxian hatchling chirred and fluted, and its parent crooned back in a voice like a kettle humming. Arya flexed her hands against the tingling numbness that came with artificial gravity settling on bones that had been weightless for the last 6 hours. She rolled her shoulders, felt the gritty strap bite her flight jacket, and exhaled, slow. This was it. The place her father had called a ridiculous, gorgeous gamble. The place her mother had just called wistful and proud and trying so hard not to show it, far. The soft chime sounded. "Debarkation in 2 minutes," said a voice with no species markers, a gentle, neutral tone wrapped in standard. "Welcome to Zhurun Academy. Please collect all belongings. No open biocontainers permitted planetside." Arya tugged the strap of her duffel higher, checked the inner pocket where her deployable tablet slept, and slipped the braided cord her grandmother had tied blue thread, piece of earth around her wrist. The cabin hatch iris swinked, and a crisp breath of air moved through the aisle, carrying scents that didn't belong to any single world: citrus cleaner and ozone, a resin note like pine but not pine, and underneath, something hot and mineral, as if the station itself had a heartbeat. The line shuffled forward. A Kashi cadet with faceted black eyes and a chittering translator clung to a scuffed case, labeled with pictograms. Behind Arya, a Threxian a head taller than her and plated in overlapping scales the color of deep moss checked his reflection in the viewport and smoothed the sweep of his crest. He caught her looking and executed a proper nod, a deliberate angle and hold she'd learned during her orientation courses. She returned it. He seemed surprised she knew the gesture. The hatch opened onto a gangway washed in thin blue light. Beyond it, the arrival concourse spread like the inside of an amphitheater, terraced platforms curving around an open core that plunged into the station's depths. Transparent floor panels revealed traffic, drones gliding with parcels, cadets in tight clusters, a silver arc of shuttle pods whisking along a mag rail like beads on a string. On the far side, a broad viewport through a strip of Zhurun itself into the concourse an amber planet swaddled in cloud bands. One polar region sparkling with ice. She lingered a second, then let the flow carry her to the first checkpoint, a membrane gate scanned for pathogens and contraband. It puckered as individuals passed, microfilaments stroking exposed skin in a ticklish whisper. Signs and 8 scripts scrolled through the same instructions: eyes forward, breath normal, non-reactive movement, while a calm animated mascot in the shape of a jellyfish demonstrated. Arya resisted the urge to laugh. On Earth, the same process had involved nurses in shapeless scrubs and an old machine that wheezed. Here, it was all elegance and soft light. She walked through the gate and felt the subtle prickles of the skin sweep her, hair lifting. Like a static kiss, the membrane chimed green. A trio of cadets ahead of her got the same tone. One Kashi got a yellow and stood sheepish while a bot split his case and pulled out a packet of home-fermented nectar. The bot pulsed a disapproving magenta. "No open biocontainers," it repeated, with the exhausted patience of someone who had said this 1,000 times. Past the gate, a reception field unfolded, banners drifting in artificial breeze, each displaying a house crest she couldn't yet name, a ring of counselors and drones offering translation modules, and at the center, a pillar that extruded wrist tags, shimmering and adapting to match the wearer's physiology. Arya pressed her palm to the panel. The tag constricted around her left wrist with a soft thermal mumble. Its surface went matte. A line of text flowed into existence on it. HOLT. Arya species, human cohort, 753A advisor, Commander CERN crystalline quarters, ring 3N. Atrium 9. The tag pulsed once, then hummed a gentle orientation pattern, a haptic instruction set for where to go next. Arya couldn't help the grin. Human neural wiring and tactile cues had turned out to be a strangely good match. She'd aced the orientation module in the prep curriculum and annoyed her peers with how much she enjoyed the wrist buzzers. First time, the Threxian had ended up beside her, His voice buzzed like a bass guitar plucked gently, his translator lagging just a fraction behind. "First time anywhere but home and the Soul Gate," Arya said. "I'm Arya. Kale," he offered. He eyed her wrist tag. "Commander Soren, you've been assigned the Stone Singer." "The Stone Singer?" "It is a Threxian name for those of his kind," Kale said. "Crystalline. They sing to shape their bodies, we say. He is a veteran of 3 border pacifications. He will be precise. Sounds like a party," Arya said lightly. Cal's crest angled in the Threxian equivalent of a chuckle. They were funneled into a broad corridor backed by a living wall. Earth's cities had living walls too, but they were all curated ferns, ivy, flowers engineered to survive on recycled gem air and gray water. This wall was its own ecosystem, ribbons of moss from Harg's temperate cliffs, wove around branching salt-tolerant trees from Phoebe's shorelines, and between them twined something like a vine that wasn't quite a vine, its leaves flecked with flecks of light that were perhaps not light at all but tiny symbionts. The air here was wetter, cooler. The hum of the station softened under it. "Keep moving," called a steward whose uniform color marked her as facilities. "Cadets, proceed to induction hall. Room assignments will be dispensed there. Please, no climbing the phyto-wall. People climb the wall," Arya said. Kale considered. His crest rose and fell. "Humans might." She laughed, and the sound shook loose some of the tight knot in her stomach. It was there, a little coil of fear, and pretending it wasn't would be silly. But fear, she reminded herself, was just a data stream input, not a command. The corridor spilled them at last into induction hall, a broad, low space that felt like a public square cradled by a ship's ribcage. The ceiling's latticework included small panels that changed hue in slow waves, mimicking a sky that was not sky. Holos labeled with languages and course tracks hung like lit flags over tables. Xenolaw, Astronav, Sociotactics, Engineering Systems, Field Medical, Ethics. A stage sat at the far end, flanked by banners bearing the Academy sigil, a stylized star within a ring within a curve. Arya found the line for Cohort 753A, met briefly the polite gaze of Akashi whose antennae trembled in subtle patterns, and took her room chip from a drone whose manner suggested, if a drone could have a manner, board professionalism, ring 3, it said, flashing her directions to her wrist tag. Cross the atrium plaza and follow the haptic path. Orientation begins at third tone. When's third tone? Arya asked. The drone pulsed her wrist twice, then thrice, then a pause. Like that, it said, dry. She liked it. Across the hall, a cluster of crystalline-bodied cadets stood together, light glancing off their faceted surfaces in prismatic quirks, a single stone-pale figure at their edge taller, broader in the facets. The geometry of his shoulders more load-bearing than decorative watched the flow of rivals, with a stillness that was almost architectural. Commander Soren, Arya guessed. Even before her wrist tag pinged and projected a tiny arrow toward him, she approached. "Cadet Holt," he said, before she'd opened her mouth. His voice was a choir sung soft and tightly tuned, multiple tones braided together into speech. "You took the outer gangway, not the inner. You stopped to look at the viewport, and you are human." The gangway had fewer people, Arya said, fighting the impulse to straighten like she had during exams. "And the planet's beautiful. Observation without stopping one's feet is a skill we will hone," Soren said, without heat. His faceted brow made a motion that might, in a carbon sack, have been called wry. "Welcome to Jrun, Cadet. You will be tested here, not just in body. Your choices will be audited." Arya opened her hands. "That's why I came." Soren gestured toward the stage. "Induction in 20 minutes. Find your seat. Do not be late." He moved away like a glacier deciding to go somewhere. Arya drifted with the crowd toward the seating terraces. She found Kale again, and the Kashi whose translator had a melodic trill introduced herself as Lyra. Her carapace was a soft mat, her mandibles delicate, and she wore a scarf whose color shifted with her mood in warm eddies. "You're human," Lyra said, antennae flicking as if tasting the word. "We studied your entry into the Concord. Your planet's negotiation style was described as improvisational." "That's the nice word," Arya said. "There were others. Chaotic," Lyra said, without malice. "And surprisingly effective. The first tone chimed low and clear, something you felt as much as heard. Conversations softened. Stewards started herding. Arya took her seat with her new acquaintances. The second tone followed, then the third, and a hush settled that felt ceremonial. The Academy's commandant took the stage, a tall being with a long crest of shimmering feathers. That caught the overhead waves of light and turned them into aurora. She spoke in Concord, and the translation net handled meaning in layers. "You are here," she said, "because you intend to hold a line, not always against an enemy, often against ignorance, sometimes against yourselves. You will learn the instrument you are. You will tune it until you are useful." A smile like a blade's reflection flickered. "We will not make you into something else. We will show you what you are, and what you can do when you are not looking away." It should have been grandiose. Somehow, it wasn't. When the commandant stepped back, the hall's lights warmed. The banners that had hung still drifted, as if in a wind. The orientation drones lit up and shot to their stations like comets. They were released to explore the main atrium, a circular plaza that opened onto the living wall gardens and training yards. A shallow pool ringed the space, its water lapping at polished stone. Steps descended into it in easy curves. Students soaked their feet, claws, or whatever appendages fit, and chatted in a dozen dialects. Overhead, a transport spine cut across the void. The pod rail Arya had seen earlier Faintham riding a thin slipstream. Arya checked her wrist. She had 28 minutes before the module demonstration. Enough time for a quick pass through the gardens and a breath of anything not recycled thrice over. She hesitated, then glanced at Kale and Lyra. "Want to see the Phyta Gardens?" Kale considered. "I should calibrate my training gauntlets, but I am told the gardens are very..." He searched for the word, "green." Arya offered. Distracting, he finished, a little apologetic. Lyra tilted her head. "I will come. The Kashi build with plants when we can. I want to see what this place thinks plants are for." They crossed into the garden plaza. The temperature dropped a degree. Light shifting from overhead white to a dappled mix that mimicked a canopy. Smells layered, wet loam, peppermint bite, a high floral note Arya couldn't name. The pots were crushed shell and something like moss. The structural supports were disguised as bending trunks. Signs in small, polite fonts reminded visitors not to feed the symbionts. Bioluminescent fungi winked from shadowed nooks, like someone had tossed a handful of stars into the undergrowth and they'd missed the path. Arya drifted to a bench and sat. Earth had parks, of course. Some of them were arranged like this, with care and touch. But Earth's parks smelled like food trucks and old sunlight. This smelled like an intention older than her planet's membership in the Concord. She looked up through the synthetic treetop canopy at a slice of station ceiling painted like sky, and let herself be grateful. The underbrush opposite her shivered. Lyra froze, antennae stiff. Kel's crest lowered in caution, plates along his shoulders rising imperceptibly. Something moves. Lyra murmured. Arya watched with them. A long blade leaf parted. A small shape slid through with the liquid ease of a water creature adapting to air. It was the color of rust and dusk, its fur banded with deeper stripes that cut its flanks into parentheses. Ears set back, eyes glossy black and forward-facing, muzzle too short for a true predator. Its paws splayed delicately, each toe tipped with a crescent claw that retracted as it placed weight. It paused with forepaws on a rock, sniffed the air, and then sneezed. The sound ridiculous for how sharp it looked. "Jirik," Kale said softly. Even whispering, his translator allowed the name to carry all the caution he meant. A cub. Arya's training modules flipped through her mind. Jirik, native to Cardoon, an arboreal omnivore. Curiosity-driven social bonds. Will bite if frightened. Avoid sudden vertical motion and direct stare. Do not emulate prey behavior. Make yourself big and calm. Another leaf shivered, and a second shape ghosted into view, behind the first sleeker by a hair, eyes brighter. The shoulder stripes a shade more contrast. They moved with that indecent competence young animals sometimes had, confidence without wisdom. The first cub put its nose down, found a discarded wrapper polite sign ignored, and wrestled with it, making a crinkling celebration of contraband. Lyra's antennae trembled with conflict. She took a half step back. Kel's crest angled forward now, calculation sharp in the tilt. "Do we call facilities?" Lyra whispered. "There's a protocol," Cale said. "We detour and alert. We do not engage. A mother might be near." Arya heard them. She also heard the footsteps of a trio of cadets rounding the path behind them, laughing. Not looking where they were going, she rose as calmly as she knew how and lifted a hand. Palm outward, the cross-species gesture she'd learned in some long ago pre-Concord Earth documentary. "I see you. I am not a threat." She stepped to the path's center, blocking the oncoming cadets with a small motion and a smile that took the edges off her slow. She said to them, softly, "Look left." They did. They saw, and what happened next felt both inevitable and preventable. One cadet squeaked. Another braked so abruptly that her 6th foot she had 6 slid on the moss. Their sudden vertical motion snapped like a flag in the cub's brains. The first cub abandoned its treasure and shot forward, low and fast, a streak of fur with a purr that had turned, in the space of a heartbeat, to a warning growl. Cale inhaled, crest rising with alarm. Lyra's translator trilled a string of words too fast to parse. Someone down the path called, "Hey, hey," as if that would mean anything in any language. Arya's body did something before she had time to put the action into words. She shifted her feet into a boxer's stance she hadn't used since the community gym. Back in Sacramento, she lowered her center of gravity, kept her hands open and her elbows loose. She didn't make herself big. She made herself steady. The cub's trajectory shifted a hair at the last second. Its claws brushed her flight jacket, and instead of bouncing away it climbed paws, finding purchase on fabric, and strapped like it had been doing this all its life. It scrambled up, made a brief, ridiculous hop from wrist to shoulder, and settled there, all ribs and warm weight, and the smell of sun-warmed fur. It set its chin on the curve of her neck as if the spot had been reserved for it since forever. The whole grove paused. There was the ambient garden noise, the burble of a tiny watercourse, the soft venting of the HVAC, the quiet whispering hush of 100 held breaths. Arya heard her own pulse. It was quick, but steady enough to count on. The cadets who'd blundered into the scene backed away, hands rising in a universal, "Oh no, 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 we are not part of this." Lyra had stepped behind Arya by a fraction, antennae recording every micro shift like they could become a lesson later. Kel's hands had gone to his belt where, in a real field scenario, a baton would hang. Here, in the garden, there was nothing but air and training. The cub purred. Not a warning now. A deep, vibrating, astonishingly loud rumble that crept through Arya's clavicle and spread in a warm buzz. Down her spine, it nosed under her hair, found skin, and bumped it in sleepy affection. "Hey," Arya said, quietly. She tipped her head. Not much, just enough to keep from pressing it. Her hands stayed loose at her sides. She didn't reach for it. Grabbing could spook even a friendly creature. "You're a friendly one, huh?" The second cub, late to decide between flight and curiosity, chose curiosity, as young things so often do. It circled Arya's boots, sniffing. It put its front paws up on her shin and stretched, tiny spine rippling. The first cub lifted its head and made a soft chirp. The second chirped back and, after some dignified consideration, sat on Kel's foot. You could have lit the plaza with the expression that flickered across the Threxian's face. Lyra exhaled, a shiver in the sound that wasn't quite a laugh but held its shape. "They like you," she said, awe and bafflement stitched together. "Why do they like you?" "Probably because I smell like travel snacks," Arya murmured, still not moving much. "Or because you did not smell like fear," Cale said, voice low. His crest eased. He looked from the cub on his foot to the one draped like a scarf over Arya's shoulder, and shook his head in slow disbelief. "Humans." Arya let herself breathe more normally. Her fear not traitorous, merely present, dissolved in increment. It wasn't gone. The cub's claws were still claws. There could be a mother, as Cale had said. There could be facility agents, riving with nets and scolds. But the line of her fear had slackened, and there was space to notice other things. The way the cub's heart thumped fast against her shoulder, the way its purr varied in little tides, the way the second cub's whiskers trembled when Lyra tentatively lowered one finger for it to sniff a figure detached from the flow of students at the atriums. Edgen strode into the garden with the inexorable momentum of authority. He didn't hurry, but the space seemed to make way. Crystal facets caught the garden's dapple and made it geometry. Commander Sorn stopped 2 paces away, regarded the scene, and did nothing for 3 breaths. That, he said at last, in his braided voice, is not by the book. Arya shifted her eyes to him without moving her head. The cub didn't read the book either, sir. There was a pause that might have been profound annoyance on another face. On Sorn's, it was impossible to read except the light that moved in his facets warmed a fraction. Facilities will be displeased, he said. However, his gaze moved, tiny facet rotation like a lens shifting focus. From cub to cadets to the path where feet had scuffed the moss. You held. You made no prey moves. You prevented a cascade of panic. You did not reward the animal with food. I didn't have any, Arya said. Which was true only because her snacks were in her duffel. Even better, Sorn said dryly. To facilities stewards arrived, gloves on, nets discreetly folded small in their hands. They assessed and relaxed fractions when they saw the scene's soft edges. One whistled a pattern Arya didn't recognize. The cub on her shoulder chirped back. The second cub trilled, then sprang lightly to the ground and trotted over like a dog knowing its walker. By the sound of the leash, Arya's cub, the absurd phrase came uninvited and made her grin. Took a moment, but when the steward's fingers fluttered in a coaxing rhythm, it launched itself with that same rapid grace and landed against the steward's chest. The steward caught it trained, ready, and tucked it into a carrier that looked more like a hug than a trap. Cubs slipped the habitat boundary, the first steward said to Sorn, to the scene. To the wrist cameras hundreds of cadets had slyly activated. We'll get the fences checked. Perhaps, Sorn said. The fences are not the only thing to check. The stewards, Sai said they had heard some version of this before. They gave Arya a look that held, improbably, gratitude. Good instincts, the steward said. Please don't make a habit of it. No plans to, Arya said. Her shoulder felt suddenly light. The warmth lingered like a sun print. The gathered cadets began to breathe as a group again. Conversation resumed in eddies. A few gave Arya the kind of glance reserved for someone who had been foolish, brave, or both. Kale shifted his foot gently to dislodge the weight of the second cub's memory. Lyra's scarf had calmed to a soft terracotta, amusement and relief smudged together. Sorn waited until the stewards had gone. Then he tipped his head, just a degree. Cadet Holt, your orientation module begins in 9 minutes. You have time to be on time. Do not squander it. Yes, sir, Arya said. He pivoted to go, then paused. Fear, he said, almost to the air, is information. We will teach you the rest. When he'd gone, Kale released a breath that had sounded like he'd been holding it since the shuttle had docked. He looked at Arya, eyes bright. You did not flinch. I flinched a little on the inside, Arya admitted. You just didn't see it. That's the trick. The trick, Lyra said, antennae curling, is that you smiled. Arya touched the place on her shoulder where the cub's chin had rested. Felt the ghost of the purr in her skin. It wasn't a trick, she said. I was glad of a small predator leaping onto your neck, Kale said, deadpan. Of getting to choose who I was in the moment, Arya said. She shouldered her duffel and felt the straps bite reassuringly into muscle. She checked her wrist. 7 minutes now and nodded toward the training hall. Come on, let's go be on time. I'd hate to disappoint the stone singer on my first hour. They moved back through the garden, into the plaza where the pool caught the station lights and made them ripple. The casual murmur of 1,000 languages folded around them like surf. Above, a pod streaked along the transport spine, a silver mouse on a wire. Arya matched her steps to its hum without thinking. The fear knot in her belly had loosened into something with edges she could grip. Excitement. Responsibility. The kind of lightness that made you aware of gravity, not dreading it. At the door to the induction module, Lyra paused, antennae flicking toward Arya in a small bow. I am glad I met you before the Academy tells me who you are. Same, Arya said. Kel's crest lifted, then flattened in what she now knew was Threxian humor. If a Mother Jurek appears, we will hide behind you, he said solemnly. Arya shot him a look, smiling. We'll climb a tree together, she said. No prey moves, no prey moves. Kale agreed, and the translator made his buzz into a soft laugh. They slid into their seats as the fourth tone the warning for module start trolled across the hall. Arya cracked her knuckles under the table, set her tablet on the desk, and let her mind sharpen to the shape of what was to come: ethics diagrams and scenario maps, maps of star lanes and legal corridors, questions with no single right answer and a dozen wrong ones. Outside, the garden would knit itself back around the small disturbance. The cubs would be returned to their habitat. Facilities would fix their fences, or not, and life in the atrium would continue its rhythm of arrival and departure. Inside, Commander Sorn's voice carried without amplification: "Cadets, we begin with a simple principle. Not everything that is dangerous needs to be fought." Arya's mouth twitched. She took notes. She listened, and in the place under her collarbone, where a cub's purr had settled like a warm coin a few minutes ago, something steady pulsed, an understanding not yet language, a guideline not yet articulated. Fear is information. The smile is a choice. She could work with that. The artificial day on Jrun rose not with light, but with sound, a faint, melodic hum that shifted the station's circadian rhythm by degrees. It rippled through the dormitory walls like a heartbeat, soft enough to be ignored, but impossible to sleep through. Arya Holt stirred before the hum even finished its second cycle. She'd been awake for almost an hour, eyes tracing the thin seam of the ceiling above her bunk, replaying the events in the garden over and over. The cub's weight on her shoulder, its heartbeat against her neck, the look on the other cadets' faces: fear, yes, but something else too. A question. It wasn't the first time Arya had been the subject of that question. She'd seen it at the diplomatic reception Earth held the day the Concord admitted them into the fold. Alien dignitaries eyeing humans like curious, unpredictable variables. She'd seen it in the shuttle on the way here, when Akashi hatchling had burst into panicked sobs at the sight of her teeth. And now she'd seen it again, when an animal everyone else feared had chosen her as a perch: humans. Kale had muttered afterward, still shaking his head, "Always the strangest solution." Arya smiled at the memory as she pulled herself out of bed and swung her feet onto the warm tiled floor. Her new uniform, slate gray with a silver blue collar stripe, hung pressed and ready. The day's schedule glowed on the wall display: 0600, morning formation and planetary anthem; 700, xenocultural psychology, the anatomy of fear; 930, tactical cooperation drill; 1300, field simulation briefing; 1800, intercohort social orientation mandatory. Anatomy of fear. The irony wasn't lost on her. A lesson in Firth Lecture Hall of the Academy's Xenopsychology Department was a cathedral of thought, circular, tiered, its walls alive with holoprojections of neural pathways and evolutionary charts. Cadets filed in by species and cohort, and Arya felt the subtle pull of gazes again as she slipped into her seat beside Kale and Lyra. "Morning," she said brightly. "Morning." Lyra clicked, her antennae dipping politely. "I see you survived without further predator encounters. Disappointing, I know." Arya grinned. "I was hoping to make it a daily tradition." Kale made a noise halfway between a snort and a purr. "Please don't." The hall dimmed. A beam of light coalesced into a figure at the center: Dr. Varan, a Nyrian psychologist whose translucent skin revealed a lattice of luminous veins beneath. Her voice was musical, layered with harmonics that seemed to speak to more than just the ear. "Cadets," she began, "fear is the first teacher every intelligent species meets. It predates language, predates reason, predates even the concept of self. It is not the enemy of intellect, it is its parent." A holo display blossomed around her, showing creatures from 100 worlds, a gliding avian freezing mid-flight at a predator's shadow, a hive-mind organism contracting when faced with unknown stimuli, a human child flinching at thunder. "Fear," Varan continued, "is a data signal. It informs an organism of change, of risk, of consequence. But fear is not absolute. It is filtered by experience, tempered by culture, shaped by memory." Her voice softened. "And it is interpreted." She gestured, and the holo shifted to a series of comparative charts. Spikes of cortisol and adrenaline in different species, reaction times, instinctive motor patterns. One bar stood out: Higher, broader, more chaotic. Labeled simply, Homo sapiens, humans, she said, her gaze drifting toward Arya's section. Exhibit the most variable fear responses in the Concord. They freeze, they flee, they fight, they laugh, they reason, they befriend. Some psychologists theorize that this variability, this unpredictability, is their greatest evolutionary adaptation. The room hummed with quiet speculation. Arya felt Kel's eyes on her. Befriend? He whispered. Is that what you call letting a Jurek cub use you as a tree? Arya smirked. Worked, didn't it? Culture of courage. After the lecture, the cadets spilled into the Atrium Cafe, a multi-level space of glass walkways and floating seating pods suspended in low gravity. Conversations clustered like eddies, animated, skeptical, curious. That part about humans was exaggerated, muttered a crystalline cadet as Arya passed. Unpredictability is just another word for recklessness. She's the one from the garden, right? Said another. The one the Jurek liked, scoffed Akashi, or misidentified as prey. Arya ignored them and found a table by the observation window. Jurun turned slowly below, a molten desert world streaked with thin, iridescent rivers. From up here, it looked harmless. From the surface, it was one of the most hostile places in the Concord. Lyra joined her, carrying a bowl of spiced Poland grain. They talk because they are unsettled, she said gently. You confuse their expectations. Not the first time, Arya said with a sigh. Does that bother you? Arya thought for a moment. It used to, but I think I'd rather be unexpected than invisible. Kale arrived, balancing a tray of something that steamed and hissed faintly. Unexpected is dangerous, he said as he sat. But it is also useful. Useful how? He considered her. Predators expect prey to run. Soldiers expect enemies to fight. If you do neither, they must think. And thinking slows them down. Lyra's antennae bobbed in agreement. That is why humans make such curious diplomats and such dangerous warriors. Arya gave a half smile. We try. The simulation chamber afternoon brought the first real test of their courage. A tactical cooperation simulation. The chamber was a marvel, a hemispherical dome, where holo-emitters could create fully immersive environments indistinguishable from reality. Today's program, hostile encounter, unknown terrain. The cadets assembled in full training gear, light armor, tactical visors, neural-linked comms. Commander Sorn strode before them, his crystalline bulk catching the simulation lights like facets of a jewel. This exercise is not about victory, he announced. It is about response. Your team will encounter an unknown species exhibiting aggressive behavior. Your mission is simple. Assess, survive, and if possible, establish communication. The floor beneath them dissolved into forest, dense, misted, humid. Strange bioluminescent spores floated in the air. Alien birds screamed somewhere overhead. Movement at 8 o'clock. Kale hissed through the comm. Multiple heat signatures. The squad tightened formation, scanning the tree line. Shadows darted. Then, without warning, 3 hulking quadrupeds burst from the undergrowth, armored hides. Curved tusks, eyes glowing with primal intensity. Contact. Shouted Lyra. Weapons came up. Safeties clicked off. Arya's visor flooded with data, heart rates spiking, cortisol levels rising. She felt the first electric jolt of fear twist in her gut. Data signal. She reminded herself. Information. Wait, she said. Hold fire. The others hesitated. The creatures weren't attacking, not yet. They were circling, sniffing, testing. Look at their formation, Arya murmured. They're not charging, they're herding or flanking. Kale growled. Maybe both, she said. But if they wanted us dead, we'd be dead. One of the beasts stepped closer, rumbling low. Arya met its gaze, not with challenge, not with submission, but with steady curiosity. Slowly, she lowered her rifle and extended an open palm. What are you doing? Lyra hissed. Choosing, Arya said simply. The creature snorted, nostrils flaring. Then it did something none of them expected. It lowered its massive head and sniffed her hand. A soft, chuffing sound followed, almost a greeting. The simulation timer froze. The farce dissolved. Exercise complete, said Sorn's voice. Result, success. The aftermath. Back in the debriefing chamber, the cadets were buzzing. Some congratulated Arya. Others shook their heads in disbelief. "You were insane to lower your weapon," said one. "You risked the entire squad," said another. "And yet," Sorn interrupted, stepping into the room, "she succeeded where most of you would have failed." The crystalline commander regarded Arya for a long moment. "Explain your reasoning." Arya swallowed. "Fear tells us to fight or flee, but that's not the only option. Sometimes, fear is just telling us we don't understand something yet. And if we listen, if we stay calm, we might find another way." Sorn's facets glimmered faintly. "You have much to learn, but your instincts serve you well." He turned to the rest of the squad. "Remember this lesson, cadets. Courage is not the suppression of fear. It is the decision to act with reason despite it." Evening reflections later that night. Arya sat in the garden again. The soft glow of Jarun's twin moons poured through the viewport above. Echo, the Jurek cub she'd rescued, now officially part of the Academy's xenobiology program, bounded toward her from the underbrush and leapt into her lap with a familiar purr. "Hey, little explorer," she whispered, scratching behind its ears. "You're fearless, aren't you?" But she knew that wasn't true. The cub had been afraid that day, just as she had. The difference was that both of them had made a choice to trust rather than to panic. Lyra joined her on the bench, antennae flicking lazily. "You've changed the way some cadets think about humans," she said. "Good or bad?" "Neither," Lyra replied. "Just different." Kale appeared next, carrying 3 cups of steaming, spiced tea. "Tomorrow is survival training on Varkath," he said. "If the predators don't eat us, the heat will." Arya grinned. "Guess we'd better learn to be friends with the predators." Kale shook his head. "Humans," he muttered, but this time, it wasn't disapproval. It was admiration. Arya looked down at the cub, then up at the stars beyond the viewport. For the first time since leaving Earth, even from orbit, the volcanic moon looked hostile, a wounded, living ember circling the gas giant Derex. Its crust split into vast fissures glowing with rivers of molten rock. Great plumes of superheated ash spiraled upward into space, a reminder that this was no gentle world waiting to be tamed. Varkath roared at the stars, daring them to come closer. It was the perfect testing ground. "Cadets." Commander Sorn's voice boomed in the hangar, reverberating off the walls like a slow drumbeat. "The purpose of this mission is not conquest. It is survival. You will not find comfort below. You will not find safety. You will find only heat, hunger, and the kind of silence that devours the unprepared." A hush settled over the assembled recruits. Arya's pulse quickened, but she stood straighter. She'd been through dozens of simulations in controlled environments. This was different. This was real. Sorn continued, pacing before them. "Your objective, reach the extraction site at Crater Point 7 within 72 standard hours. You will travel 32 kilometers across hostile terrain. Your supplies will be limited. The environment will try to kill you. And if you fail to work as a unit," his facets caught the light, scattering it like 100 tiny suns, "you will not return at all." Arya glanced at her assigned team, Squad Theta, 6 cadets, all from different worlds. Kale, the stoic Threxian warrior whose crest shifted color with his mood. Lyra, the sharp-minded Kashi with an unmatched tactical brain. Dren, a crystalline being like Sorn but younger, eager to prove himself. Sar, a telepathic Nerian medic whose empathy could calm even the fiercest rage. And Arya Holt, human, unpredictable, untested, unafraid. At her feet. Echo, the Jurek cub now wearing a tiny field harness, chirped excitedly. His presence had been controversial, but the xenobiology department had agreed to let him accompany her. As part of an interspecies field bonding study, privately, Arya knew he was more than a study subject. He was her partner. Kale adjusted the strap on his gear pack. 3 days in that hellscape, he muttered. "I've seen combat zones friendlier than Varkath. Then we'll just have to be smarter than the moon," Arya replied. Checking the seals on her heat-resistant suit, Lyra gave a dry click of amusement. Or luckier, descent into Fereth drop ship shuddered as it pierced Varkath's thin atmosphere, the hull glowing orange with friction. Arya pressed her face to the porthole and watched as the landscape came into focus. A jagged wasteland of black basalt plains, molten rivers winding like veins of fire, and distant mountain spires vomiting ash into a rust-colored sky. Surface temperature, 71 degrees Celsius, the ship's AI announced. Toxicity index, moderate. Radiation, within tolerable limits. Recommend limited exposure. The doors hissed open, and a wave of heat hit them like a physical blow. Arya's visor fogged before the internal filters cleared it. The air smelled of sulfur and iron, the scent of a planet still being born. Move out. Kale barked, taking point. The rest of Squad Theta fell in behind him, scanning the horizon. The ground beneath their boots was warm, pulsing faintly with geothermal energy. In the distance, a thin column of smoke marked the direction of Crater Point 7. Their mission had begun. First night they made camp inside the hollow of an ancient lava tube, its interior smooth and glassy, still radiating faint warmth from flows centuries old. Arya unpacked a compact shelter unit while Lyra charted their progress on her holomap. 10 kilometers covered, Lyra reported. Not bad for the first day, not good enough. Kale countered. The next stretch crosses an open plain, no cover. If the wind shifts, we'll be walking through a storm of glass. Then we move before dawn, Arya said, checking Echo's sensors. The cub was curled up beside her pack, fast asleep, his fur rising and falling with soft purrs. Cooler temperatures, lower risk. Kale gave her a sidelong look. You speak like you've done this before. Earth has deserts, she replied. Different kind of death, same principles. Sar sat nearby, eyes closed in meditation. I sense anxiety, he murmured. Not just from us, from the planet itself. As if it resents our presence. Planets don't feel, Dren scoffed. Tell that to the volcano. Arya muttered. Ambush in the ash. Second day dawn blood red and blistering. The cadets moved across the basalt plain in tight formation, their boots crunching against brittle shards of cooled lava. The horizon shimmered with heat. Then, without warning, the ground moved. Contact. Kale shouted as the surface erupted in a shower of rock and ash. Massive shapes burst forth. 6-legged beasts with armored hides and molten cores glowing beneath their cracked skin. Their roar was like the scream of a planet in agony. Pharaoh beasts. Lyra cried. Defensive pattern delta. The squad scattered into cover, though there was little of it. The beasts charged, their heavy feet shaking the ground. One slammed into Dren, hurling him against a boulder. His crystalline shell cracked. They're too strong. Kale yelled, blasting one with a concussive round. It barely slowed. Arya's mind raced. Fear, information. Information, choice. The Pharaoh beasts weren't hunting. They were reacting, defending something. But what? Look, she shouted, pointing toward a cluster of jagged stones. Nestled inside was a clutch of glowing eggs, pulsing faintly like beating hearts. They're protecting a nest, she realized. Kale snarled. We're not leaving Dren behind. And we're not killing them, Arya snapped. We don't have to. She turned to Echo, who was growling softly beside her. I need a distraction, little guy. Can you do that? The cub chirped once and bolted. He darted across the plain, zigzagging between the Pharaoh beasts, yipping and chirring, to broke off from the group, pursuing him. The others hesitated, confused. Move, Arya shouted. Now. The squad sprinted toward a ridge on the far side of the plain. Arya's heart pounded as Echo narrowly dodged a massive claw swipe and darted back toward her. She scooped him up mid-run and vaulted over a low ridge just as the beasts regrouped behind them. Breathing hard, Kale clapped a heavy hand on her shoulder. You're insane, he said. But it worked, Arya smiled. Fear doesn't always mean fight or flight. Sometimes it means understand. Beneath the moon's skinth at night, they sheltered in the shadow of a basalt spire, nursing their wounds. Dren's crack had been sealed with a field adhesive, though he would need full repair once they returned. The mood was tense, but victorious. We're halfway, Lyra reported. But tomorrow is the hardest part, the scalding chasm, 2 kilometers of fissures and lava rivers. No stable ground. Any route around it? Sar asked. None within range, Lyra replied. We go through or we fail. Arya looked down at Echo, curled against her side. The cub had a small scorch mark on his flank from the encounter, but he was otherwise fine. She stroked his fur gently. Tomorrow, she whispered, we show them what we're really made of. The scalding chasm. Day 3 began with a storm, a rain of volcanic glass driven by razor winds. The cadets wrapped their suits tighter and pressed on, every step bringing them closer to the roaring edge of the chasm. It was worse than they'd imagined. A yawning fissure stretched before them, hundreds of meters deep and glowing with molten rivers below. Jets of superheated gas hissed from cracks, and the only way across was a series of narrow basalt bridges, some no wider than a handspan. "This is madness," Cale muttered. "No," Arya said, stepping onto the first bridge. "This is trust." One by one, they crossed, inch by inch, step by trembling step. At one point, a tremor shook the bridge beneath them, sending shards tumbling into the lava below. Lyra nearly slipped, but Arya caught her wrist and pulled her back. When they finally reached the other side, they collapsed on the ground, gasping. "We did it." Dren breathed. "We're alive." "Not yet," Arya said, pointing to the horizon. "We still have 5 kilometers to the extraction point." Crater Point 70 reached Crater Point 7 just as the extraction ship descended. Through the hazy sky, its engines kicking up waves of dust and ash, the cadets were battered, bruised, and burned, but they were together. As the ramp lowered, Commander Sun stood waiting, his crystalline form gleaming in the harsh light. "You survived," he said simply. "Barely," Cale muttered. "Survival is never graceful," Sun replied. His gaze fell on Arya. "But sometimes it is wise." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I read the mission report. You refused to fight the Pharaoh beasts. You risked the mission for understanding. Tell me why." Arya met his gaze. "Because fear isn't the enemy. It's a message. And if we don't listen to it, if we just react, we miss the truth underneath." Sun regarded her silently for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Perhaps," he said, "humanity's unpredictability is not a weakness, but its greatest strength." Echo chirped from her shoulder, as if agreeing. The other cadets gathered around, no longer wary, but united, comrades forged in fire. As the extraction ship rose back into orbit, Arya gazed out the viewport at the burning world below. Varkuth had tested them, and in the crucible of fear, they had become something more than cadets. They had become a team. It wasn't that the halls had changed. The polished alloy still gleamed beneath the soft glow of plasma lanterns. The atrium still hummed with languages from 100 worlds. But the way people looked at Squad Theta had shifted. Where there had once been polite distance, now there was respect, or at least curiosity. Cadets from older cohorts nodded as they passed. Instructors paused conversations when Arya entered a room. Even the station service drones chirped a tone that sounded suspiciously like congratulations. But not everything was celebration. Commander Soren's voice over the comm that morning was crisp, clipped, and colder than usual. "Theta Squad, report to strategic briefing chamber for immediately. Full field gear." "This is not a drill." Arya exchanged a glance with Cale and Lyra. The same thought passed silently between them. Something's wrong. Uncharted territory briefing chamber for was built like a war room. Walls lined with tactical holos. Central table projecting star charts and live sensor feeds. Sun was already there, flanked by Admiral Chelen of the Concorde Exploration Fleet, a towering, feather-crested being whose presence commanded the air around her. "Cadets," Chelen said without preamble, "your next assignment will not be a simulation. You will be deployed beyond the Concorde's map frontier." A hush fell over the room. Cadets didn't leave the academy perimeter, not in their first year, and certainly not without veteran officers. Yet the Admiral continued, her tone measured and grave. 17 hours ago, the exploration vessel Rora's Wake failed to return from a survey mission in the Nther Expanse. Its final transmission indicated contact with an unknown life form. Our analysts believe the ship was disabled and is now drifting toward a gravity well. "Was it attacked?" Cale asked. "Unclear," Chelen replied. "What is clear is this: if the vessel falls into the well, we lose not only the ship but a decade's worth of exploration data, and possibly first contact protocols." "And you're sending us?" Lyra asked, antennae flicking with disbelief. Soren's voice was granite smooth. "You demonstrated adaptability under extreme conditions. You cooperated without command oversight. You made choices based on understanding, not instinct. That is precisely what this mission demands. Arya felt the weight of his gaze on her. You mean we're going to try to talk to it? Or listen to it, Cern said. If we're lucky, the edge of the Nonth journey to the Nthir expanse was a lesson in humility. For 3 days, their small reconnaissance frigate, the Resolute, slipped through regions where starlight dimmed and sensor data became unreliable. Out here, the void felt older, colder, as if the universe itself were watching. Echo paced the cabin restlessly, tail flicking. Arya crouched beside him and stroked his fur. Nervous? She whispered. The cub chirped, pressing his nose against her wrist. She smiled faintly. Yeah, me too. On the 4th day, the Aurora's wake appeared, a wounded silhouette against the dark. Its hull was scarred, one engine offline, life support systems flickering, and surrounding it, like a halo of shadow, was something. Alive. Contact, Lyra breathed. Range, 2,000 clicks. Biosignature, unknown. Composition, partially organic, partially plasma. The creature, if that's what it was unlike anything in the database. Its body was a lattice of filamentous tendrils, pulsing with bioluminescent veins. It drifted silently, almost peacefully, but every time the Resolute edged closer, the tendrils flared and the ship's instruments spiked with electromagnetic interference. It's warning us off, Tsar murmured. But it's not attacking. Fear, Arya said quietly. It's afraid. Kale frowned. Of us, maybe, Arya said. Or maybe of what it doesn't understand. The communication attempt for hours. They tried everything. Holobeacons broadcasting mathematical sequences. Biofrequency pulses mimicking non-aggression signals. Even attempts at telepathic projection through Tsar. Nothing worked. Each approach only agitated the entity further. At one point, a tendril brushed the Aurora's wake's hull, and the ship shuddered, a low, groaning wail echoing through the calm. We're running out of time, Lyra warned. Its orbit is decaying. In 6 hours, both the creature and the ship will fall into the well. Suggestions? Sorn asked. Evacuate the crew and abandon the vessel, Kale said. We save lives, even if we lose the data. No, Arya said. All eyes turned to her. We can't just extract, she continued. This thing, it's not an enemy. It's curious, confused. Maybe it's never seen technology before. Maybe it thinks the ship is alive. Maybe it's trying to help. And how do you propose we explain that to it? Lyra asked skeptically. Arya exhaled slowly. We don't explain. We show. A dangerous plan. Her idea was reckless. Everyone said so. Even Sorn, who rarely betrayed opinion, called it improvisational to the point of madness, but he didn't forbid it. And so, 3 hours before orbital decay, Arya stepped into an EVA suit and cycled through the airlock with Echo perched on her shoulder. The cub's harness now fitted with biosignal amplifiers. Are you sure about this? Kel's voice crackled in her calm. One wrong move and you'll be atomized. I'm not going to make a wrong move, she said, her voice steady. I'm going to make a familiar one. She pushed off the Resolute and drifted toward the creature. The void was absolute, soundless, weightless, endless. The entity loomed before her, a living constellation, tendrils swaying like the slow rhythm of a tide. Echo shifted nervously. Arya reached up and stroked his fur. It's okay, she whispered. Remember the garden? Same thing. New friend. The first tendril approached, thin as silk and glowing faintly. It hovered just meters from her face, trembling, not with aggression, but with hesitation. Arya extended her arm, slow, deliberate, open-palmed. The tendril brushed her glove, and a surge of light rippled through it, like a heartbeat answering another heartbeat. Then Echo did something none of them expected. He leapt gently from her shoulder, floating toward the tendril and chirping. The creature responded, coiling the tendril around him with astonishing gentleness. Another tendril reached for Arya's shoulder, mimicking the cub's earlier movement. The cadets watching from the Resolute held their breath. She's doing it, Lyra whispered. She's actually doing it. Understandings Ming shifted in that silent exchange. Arya felt, not words, not thoughts, but impressions, curiosity, uncertainty, fear, and beneath it, a deep yearning to connect. It doesn't know what we are, Arya murmured. It thought the ship was alive. It was trying to bond with it. Can you make it let go? Sorn asked. I think. I already did, as if responding to her voice. The creature began to withdraw its tendrils from the Aurora's wake. It pulsed once, a brilliant burst of color rippling through its body, and drifted backward. The interference vanished. The ship stabilized. Tractor beams engaged, Lyra said, awe in her voice. We have control. The creature lingered a moment longer, watching Arya and Echo, then turned and vanished into the darkness. A living mystery slipping back into the void from which it came. The cadet and the cub hours later. As the Aurora's wake was towed safely into Concord space, the debriefing began. Admiral Chelen stood before Squad Theta, her eyes scanning each of them in turn. You broke every rule of engagement, she said flatly. You violated 3 sections of First Contact Protocol, and you risked your life without authorization. Arya swallowed. Yes, ma'am. The Admiral's expression softened, just slightly. And because you did, 200 lives were saved, a priceless vessel recovered, and humanity has given the Concorde its first peaceful encounter with a Category 5 biosentient. She turned to Commander Sorn. I believe these cadets have passed their final evaluation. Sorn's crystalline features glimmered with pride. Indeed, graduation day weeks later, the Academy's Grand Hall was alive with celebration. Banners of every Concorde world hung from the vaulted ceiling. Cadets stood in formation, their new insignias gleaming on freshly pressed uniforms. When Arya's name was called, the hall erupted into applause. Echo bounded onto the stage with her, now the Academy's unofficial mascot, and perched proudly on her shoulder. Purring into the microphone, Cadet Arya Holt, Chelen said, pinning the insignia of a Concorde field officer to her chest. You remind us all that fear is not a barrier, but a bridge. May you carry that lesson beyond the stars. Arya stepped back, heart pounding, eyes scanning the sea of faces, Threxian, Kashi, Nyrian, and dozens more. They were no longer strangers. They were comrades, allies, family. And when the ceremony ended, they gathered around her, Kale clapping her on the back, Lyra wrapping her antennae in a Kashi sign of respect, Tsar smiling in that quiet, knowing way. You did more than survive this place, Kale said. You changed it. We changed it, Arya corrected. Together, epilogue, a smile among starsmans later, aboard the exploration cruiser Odyssey. Arya stood on the observation deck watching a nebula bloom beyond the viewport. Echo was asleep on her shoulder, purring softly as always. A junior cadet approached her, nervous and wide-eyed. Lieutenant Holt, is it true that on your first day, a predator climbed onto you and you didn't even flinch? Arya chuckled. Oh, I flinched, she admitted. But fear isn't a command. It's just information. And what did it tell you? The cadet asked. She turned to the stars, her smile small and certain. That if you keep your heart open, even when you're scared, the universe will climb onto your shoulder.